Thank you for joining us at the Forever Dublin Hub. My name is Beth Baker, and I'm the Aging in Place Navigator. The Hub is designed for those 55 and older to connect and receive help navigating the often confusing terrain of Medicare, caregiving, transportation, financial challenges, home assessment compatibility, and other issues associated with aging in our society, and more importantly, in our home. This presentation, The Building Blocks of Planning, Not Crisis Planning for Your Future, will be recorded and it will be archived on the Forever Dublin Hub. If you do not wish to have your face recorded, please disable your video on your screen. If you have questions, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen or wait until the conclusion of the presentation. I wish to introduce you today to John Sakosh of Alderstallings. John is an estate planning lawyer who's dedicated to helping families create a plan that works for them and achieves their goals. John is a graduate of Muskingum University and Capital University Law School, and he is also a member of the Ohio State Bar Association. An avid sports fan, John played football in college and currently coaches youth sports. Please welcome John Sakosh from Alderstallings, presenting the building blocks of planning, not crisis planning for your future.
Hey, thank you, Beth. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, good. Tamara, Greg, it's really nice to meet both of you today. And again, I just want to thank Beth and Victoria for setting this up and giving us the opportunity to just kind of chat here today. You know, guys, thank you so much. What I thought I would do today is I was mentioning this to Beth. I started with a PowerPoint and I thought, well, I don't know. It's Friday, it's springtime. At least I hope it's springtime. And I thought I'm going to dump the PowerPoint and just make this a little bit more conversational. And in putting some thought to today, and Beth and I have been talking over the last few months, you know, I really was reflecting on, like, you know, what kind of information that I wanted to make sure that I passed along. And I think what I came up with is I've got this mountain analogy that I've used so much in here lately, and it's something that a colleague of mine has been working on, and I kind of stole it from him a little bit. So I'm gonna use this analogy today. But before I get into the mountain talk, let me just tell you just again about me, if I could. Again, my name is John. I'm an attorney at Alderstallings. We are an estate planning and elder law firm. We're here in Ohio. We have 12 offices across the state. Here locally, we have an office in Dublin. I'm actually in our Gahanna office today. We also have an office locally in downtown Delaware. So those are our three central Ohio offices. We also have a sister company, Golden Reserve, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the services that we provide and things that we do. It's kind of a combination of what we do on the Alderstallings side and what my colleagues at Golden Reserve do as well. I would say with our company, both companies, our goal so many times is just, we want to help folks plan and protect their assets. And so many times we're focusing and working with people that are either nearing retirement or they're already there. And I think that's where this mountain analogy comes into play. I mean, if you think of your life as a mountain, you know, your adult life, that is, you know, maybe you went to college and you graduated college, or you got that first job, and then, you know, maybe you get married, maybe you have some kids. And if you think that's kind of like the beginning when you're starting this climb up this mountain, during that time when you're climbing the mountain, you know, you're working, you're saving, you're trying to grow your retirement so that someday you can do just that, reach the top of the mountain and retire. And so for us, and what we talk about in this message that I've been, you know, trying to send to a lot of folks, is during that time when you're climbing the mountain, that's exactly what you're doing, is you're climbing and you're growing and you're saving and you're investing. And then you get to the top of the mountain, right? You get to the summit, and that's maybe retirement. And a lot of the clients that we deal with are in that climb. A lot of the clients that we deal with have already reached the summit. But then once you hit that summit and you hit that, the retirement phase of your life, now you start coming back down the mountain. And the mountain analogy is growing as you're going up the mountain. As you're coming down the mountain, when you hit that retirement, this is where we focus and work with a lot of people, because there are some major obstacles that you can face as you're coming down that mountain, right? These obstacles are things like Beth and I, we've been talking about these things for the last couple months. But some of these obstacles that you'll face, and this is where I'll give you some pointers along the way, like Greg and Tamara, like if you got a notepad in front of you, like, hey, jot these points down. But those obstacles, we actually call them boulders. Those obstacles that you're going to hit or potentially face as you're coming down the mountain, we want to avoid them. Risk is boulder number one that I'm going to talk about. Feel free to jot these things down. Taxes, we always, focus here at our company on those taxes, because that can have a major impact. It's a big boulder that you can hit when you're coming down the mountain. We talk about fees, advisor fees, legal fees. Those are things that can have an impact. And then the fourth boulder, estate planning and asset protection planning. So again, risk, taxes, fees, and let's just call it estate planning. And what I thought I would do for our time here today is just touch on each one of these boulders. I'll spend most of my time focusing on boulder number 4, which is that estate planning and asset protection planning, really getting into some necessary documents that, even if you're still climbing the mountain, but most definitely if you're close to the top or you're making your way down, we want to make sure that these foundational documents in estate planning, that folks have those and they're in good working order. And I'll give you some scenarios and examples along the way. So let's start with that first boulder number 1, which is risk. I always ask folks, are you taking on too much risk, especially when you kind of get to the top of that mountain? If you're 20, from an investment standpoint, maybe you are willing to take on a little bit more risk because you have a little bit more time. I'm 51. So I can definitely tell you that I still take on some risk, but probably not as much as I did when I was in my 20s, as far as, from an investment standpoint. So we don't want, like a market downturn to have a major impact on our clients as they're coming down that mountain. I don't want a market downturn, or if they're taking on too much risk, I don't want that to impact what they have as far as their plans in retirement, their goals, their dreams. I had someone I was talking to the other day, and they're like, well, we just retired and our goal is we want to travel. We've never had the opportunity to travel. We can do that now. Well, we don't want something to happen where they're taking on too much risk and now those travel plans have been stalled, right? So something that we do at our company is we do a risk analysis for our clients, where we take a look at what they're actually investing in and find out, are you taking on too much risk? And some folks, quite frankly, are spot on. They're like, hey, this is exactly what my risk tolerance is and what, how that fits into what I want to do in my life, especially in retirement. But there are a lot of times we're talking to folks, the risk is way too high for what they want to try to accomplish and what they can achieve at this point. So we do a risk analysis for folks because we always take the approach, it's better to have the information and know where you are and know what those risk factors are to determine if in fact some type of modification or adjustment needs to be made. So that's the first boulder. The second boulder, as you're making your way down that mountain, are taxes. I would say probably 95% of the people that I talk to as an estate planning lawyer, when we sit down and we talk about documents they have in place and we talk about their family and we talk about their goals and we talk about their assets, that's an important part of what I do. I can't help you from an estate planning perspective unless I understand something about you, if you're married, your spouse, your family, your assets, your goals. That's all real important. Estate planning, despite what I think a lot of people believe, is not cookie cutter. If it's cookie cutter, you're probably missing some things along the way. But I would say 95% of the people that I talk to have an IRA, an individual retirement account, a 401k. And I think what a lot of people probably know, but a lot of people don't, is if you've got an IRA and let's say it's got $100,000 in it, you really don't have $100,000, because with the IRA or the 401, the way it works, you put your money in before you pay taxes, and you pay taxes when the money comes out. So one thing that we always talk to our clients about is we want to put a plan in place to help minimize the taxes on the IRA. Taxes have to be paid, but we want to minimize those taxes. I want to make sure I'm doing everything that I can for our clients to put more money in their pocket and less money in Uncle Sam's pocket when it comes to that IRA. And so again, what do? We do a tax plan for our client. And sometimes it has to be done every year, every other year. It changes when you're climbing the mountain. And then when you come down the mountain, that tax plan, that tax strategy can change. It's very, very different if you're married and you're filing your taxes jointly, because tax rates are kind of low when you're filing jointly. But if one spouse passes and now the surviving spouse is filing those taxes and paying those taxes on the IRA at a single tax rate, well, guess what? The tax rate probably just went up. So a good IRA tax plan needs to be something that you consider. Taxes are most definitely a boulder that can really derail your retirement if you haven't planned properly. The third boulder that we talk about, advisor fees that you pay to your financial planner. Now, this is not me attacking any financial planner. I work with a lot of financial planners, a lot of really, really good financial planners in what I do. But I'll tell you about a meeting that I had the other day. I was talking to a client and they were just raving about their advisor. And I'm like, well, I'd love to know who this person is, because I have clients that ask me all the time, do you know the name of somebody, right? And I'm always willing to give out the name of someone who I think is really, really good and it'll take care of my clients, right? So they were raving about their advisor, and I just asked one real simple question. What are you paying him a year? I mean, people ask me all the time, hey, John, how much? What am I going to owe you in legal fees? I think that's a very fair question. I have no problem with that question. How can you decide whether or not you're going to hire anybody to do something unless you know what they're going to do and what you have to pay to get that done? So what are you paying this advisor? They had no idea. So I could see that the wheels were starting to turn a little bit. So one of the things that we have at our company is we have a proprietary software where we can actually take all of their investments and tell you exactly what you're paying in fees for that financial plan, so to speak. Now, this client was a little shocked that they were paying about $10,000 a year in fees. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying now you have to ask yourself the question, if you're paying $10,000 a year in advisor fees, what are you getting in return? I mean, when you think about it, especially when you're not only just in the growth mode, but when you're coming down the mountain, one of the things that a lot of folks are concerned about when you hit that summit and you're coming down the mountain, I don't want to run out of money. I want to make sure I have enough money in retirement. That is very, very common. That is very, very appropriate to think that. Gosh, we all do, right? But if you're paying $10,000 a year in fees, that could have a major impact on your retirement resources, especially if you're not getting something really, really positive in return. So again, we have a software, we run that analysis, because again, it always goes back to, I'd rather my clients have the information and then we can assess, are we moving in the right direction? Are we avoiding these major obstacles whether we're going up the mountain or even coming down? Okay. So those are my first three boulders. We talked about, we talked in reverse order. We talked about the advisor fees. We talked about taxes, and we talked about understanding what your risk tolerance is or what it should be, you know, as you're climbing the mountain and especially as you're coming back down the mountain after you retire. So now the fourth boulder, and where I'll spend probably the most and maybe the remainder of my time, is estate planning and asset protection planning. From an estate planning perspective, it's very, very important that you have good, solid, foundational documents in place, especially as we age, especially as we get older. So these are the big four that I talk to about, and it's not going to be anything earth-shattering. You're going to say, yep, I know all about those. Greg's already shaking his head. John, I know what you're going to say. Last will and testament, an up-to-date healthcare power of attorney, a living will, and a properly documented, durable financial power of attorney. Let's take a moment and just break down each one of those. So what is a will, a last will and testament? Simply, it's a document that says, when I pass away, here's who gets my stuff. Here's where my assets go. Now, I will say that, and I always bring this up because it's super important, I really never, ever want a will to distribute any assets when I die. If I pass away and my wife, I'm married, I got 3 kids. If I pass away and my wife gets any of the money that I have that goes to her by way of my will, I will have, in my mind, failed. Because in order for that money to get from me to her, if my will has anything to do with it, she has to go to court. A will distributes property, but only distributes property through the probate court. Now, there's a lot of lawyers that do probate work, and I'll tell you, probate is very, very lucrative as a lawyer. At our firm, we're like, hey, we're no probate here. We do not want our clients to go through probate. We have attorneys that'll do it, but our goal for our clients, my goal for me personally, is if something happens to me, I want to make sure things go to my wife without going through probate, or to my kids without going through probate. Probate in Ohio, I don't know if you've ever had to deal with it. Probate can take 6 months, sometimes as much as 12 months. And there are fees associated with it that can be completely avoided. Those fees are legal fees and court fees. They can be completely avoided if you just have a probate avoidance plan. So John, why do you tell me that we need to have a will? Well, a will is a really good backup plan. It makes sure if I don't have something titled properly that it goes to my spouse. This will ensure it'll get to her even if it has to go through court. So it does memorialize the plan. The other reason why a will is important, I'm 51, but I have a young family. My kids are 16, 14, and 11. So I have to have a will because that will is the main way that I can ensure if something happens to my wife and I've appointed a guardian and a backup guardian to take care of our kids. That is the main function of a will, is for young families to establish guardianship if something happens to mom and dad. So let's talk about people that I tend to meet with. I tend to meet with people that are nearing retirement or already in retirement. And I always tell them, hey, look, if you got existing documents, I want you to bring those to our meeting because I'm not a fan of replacing things if we don't have to. But let me take a look at what you have. Let's see if what you have is in good working order. A lot of times folks will come in and they'll bring in that will package that they had done 30 years ago. And the reason why they did it is because they had young kids back then. So it served a really, really good purpose for them back then. But again, as you get older, you get to that summit, we're starting to make our way down the mountain. A will is just not as important as it used to be. Still want to have one as a backup plan. But again, we want to do some other things too. All right. So now the next document that I want to talk about, a healthcare power of attorney form. So this is simply the document that you use to identify people to talk to a doctor, a hospital, a therapist, any type of medical, professional or facility for you if you cannot. The example I always use, I walk out of the office, I fall, I bump my head, I'm at Dublin Methodist Hospital. I'm going to be okay, but I can't talk to the doctor right now because of my injuries. My healthcare power of attorney specifically says if I can't talk to the doctor, my wife can as my immediate agent. And then I have backups, my dad, my mom. Now, I could tell you there's a lot of folks that I talk to and they come in with the healthcare power of attorney form and they got one person listed, they got their spouse. That's good, but my question is, do you and your spouse ever travel together? Well, yes. Well, what if you're both in an accident, you both bump your head, and you're both at Riverside Hospital or Dublin Methodist, one in each bed, and you can't talk for each other? So my rule is you have to have, if you're married, spouse plus one. If you're single, still, I want you to have two people that you can trust, that if you can't communicate with the doctor, you've appointed some people that can talk to the doctor for you. The other thing that I'll tell you about the healthcare power of attorney, because I talk to folks about this all the time, and they're like, John, I've got one, I've had it for years, I've got my spouse, I've got our adult children as backups, and I'm like, great, let me take a look at it. And I'll take a look at it, and the document might be from 1995 or 2002. Well, there were some law changes that took place in about 2014. And if your healthcare power of attorney, even if it was done, I saw one yesterday, it was done in 2019, but the copyright date on that document was 2004. So it's an old document that an attorney just grabbed off the shelf and said, here, sign this. So the document that they have, it doesn't have any HIPAA language in it. And that's pretty important. So I said, you've got a healthcare power of attorney form. Yes, I would suggest you update it because you want to make sure that the healthcare power of attorney form has that medical release language in it. Think about this. I'm in the hospital. My wife's my agent. She needs to request medical records from the Cleveland Clinic to give it to the doctor in Dublin. If she doesn't have a medical release that I've signed, she's not going to get those medical records from the Cleveland Clinic. And that might be real important and have a major impact on the care that I need right now. If she doesn't have that HIPAA medical release, she's not going to be able to do it. So as of 2014, all the healthcare docs in Ohio, and at least the one we use, has the medical release language built right into it. Okay? So that's the healthcare power of attorney. The next document of the big four: will, healthcare power of attorney, living will, and the financial power of attorney. The living will, that's different than your last will and testament. The living will is that document that says, I don't want to be kept alive on life support. I walk out of here, I fall, I bump my head, I'm in the hospital, and it's a serious enough injury where the doctors say, no treatment is going to bring me back, I'm already gone. The living will is my statement to the world that says, let me die naturally. Now, if you don't believe in that kind of theory, and you're like, I don't want to have that living will, that's okay. That makes the healthcare power of attorney form even more important, because now whoever you've appointed as your healthcare agent, that's who's going to make those decisions, end of life decisions for you on your behalf. Okay. So now the fourth document is the durable financial power of attorney form. And this is one that I would say, gosh, probably 80 to 90% of the time when I talk to folks, unless they've met with not just an estate planning, but an elder law attorney, the financial power of attorney form that they have in place is usually missing some what I'll call hot powers. So let me give you an example. Well, let me define it first. So a financial power of attorney is very much like that healthcare power of attorney. You appoint someone to deal with finances on your behalf if you cannot. So again, I walk out of here, I fall, I bump my head, I'm at the hospital. Okay. I fall and butt my head quite often in my meetings. So I'm at the hospital, and now I'm going to be there for 6 weeks. I'm going to be okay, but I can't handle my finances right now because of this head injury. My wife will not be able to call Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard. I don't care where you have your money. My wife, if that's an IRA or a 401k that's just in my name, she's not going to be able to call that company and say, hey, I need to take some money out to pay the mortgage. They will not even talk to her unless her name is listed in my financial power of attorney that I've signed saying she's my agent, can deal with my finances if I cannot. Now, here's where, again, getting back to where a lot of folks I see and I talk to, they have the financial power of attorney, but it doesn't have the necessary powers in it. I'll give you an example of a client. I'm changing the names here. Let's call him Tom Sr. and his son, Tom Jr. So I've been working with them for the last, 4 or 5 weeks now. And I've yet to meet even Tom Sr. Tom Sr. unfortunately had a stroke and went into a nursing home. And he's doing okay, but he's in his early 80s and he's just not going to be able to care for himself any longer. He just needs 24-hour care. And his son, Tom Jr., doesn't even live in town. And so I'm dealing with Tom Jr. out of state, and he and I are talking. We've done a couple Zoom calls, as you can imagine. And one of the things that was always important to Tom Sr. was to make sure that that family farm, the family land, gets passed down to Tom Jr. and to the grandkids. Now, the unfortunate thing is that Tom Sr., although he has a financial power of attorney form, that financial power of attorney form does not have all the necessary wording in it, what I'll call these hot powers. So when Tom Jr. comes to me and says, hey, can you help me protect the farm? My job gets extremely difficult if they have a power of attorney form that doesn't have the necessary language in it. Trust creation powers, gifting powers, self-dealing powers, being able to apply for government benefits. And so when I see a lot of power of attorney forms, and this would be something to jot down, a statutory power of attorney form, you would think in Ohio, if it's like, this is an Ohio statutory POA, you would think, well, then I'm covered, right? You're not. The statutory power of attorney form is specifically missing the necessary powers that I need as an elder law attorney to help Tom Sr. and Tom Jr. protect that farm. Now, it's real simple if Tom Sr. can still sign something. But guess what? He doesn't have capacity to sign something right now. We're hoping he recovers to the point where he can sign something. But I've already talked to the folks at the facility. I've already gotten confirmation from his doctor. He can't sign something right now. So unless he can sign, our hands are tied. So kind of, reverse the clock back a little bit. Let's say 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, before he had the stroke, if he would have just signed a financial power of attorney form that has the necessary powers, we would be in the driver's seat right now, doing everything we needed to do to protect that farm. So that's why these foundational documents that we talk about, everyone knows about them, but it's like anything, the devil's in the details. You got to make sure that you have good documents in place, up to date, drafted properly, so that things can be done if they need to be done on your behalf. Okay? So now those are the big four: the will, the healthcare power of attorney, the living will, and the financial power of attorney. The last thing that I'd like to talk about as far as asset protection planning, this is, again, this fourth roadblock. When you're coming down the mountain, we want to make sure we don't take on too much risk. We want to minimize taxes. We want to be mindful of fees. But the one big boulder that can really derail someone's trip down that mountain in retirement is long-term care. A lot of folks, when I say this, look at me like I'm crazy. The average cost of a nursing home in the state of Ohio, private pay, is about $94,000 a year. You know, and I know, I mean, Beth and I have had multiple conversations about this, and she and I completely agree. If something happens to me, I don't want to go anywhere but home. You know, I mean, I want to try to age at home, and maybe getting some home care, someone helping me at home helps me just do that, stay at home. But if something happens where I need care, you know, sometimes we just don't have the choice. I mean, we might have to have that long-term care, facility-based care. So a lot of folks that we talk to ask the question, what can I do to protect that farm? What can I do to protect my assets, at least some of them, if I have that long-term care event? So going back to like Tom Sr. and Tom Jr., if I could have spoken with Tom Sr., let's just even say like 5.5 years ago, there is definitely something that I could have done then that I probably can't do right now. But there's definitely something I could have done then to protect that farm. And what we use to protect something like that, the farm, a house, even money, is an asset protection trust. So one of the main tools that we use here to help people protect and preserve assets is an asset protection trust. We call it our Heritage Trust. Now, this is a trust that we created. We've been using it for 10 plus years. And the way this trust works is you can take assets like that farm and put it into that trust. And once it's there for 5 years, it's now completely protected from any type of long-term care cost and expense. So again, if I would have met Tom Sr. 5.5 years ago, and if he would have came in well before he had the stroke and said, hey, I want to protect this farm, that would have been the vehicle that I would have used then to protect it, an asset protection trust. He puts the farm in it. After 5 years, it's 100% protected. Also, anytime we're doing any planning for somebody, we don't do one-off kind of documents here. So if I'm doing a trust, you're getting the full suite of documents with it, right? You're getting the up-to-date healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney, the living will, and all the other things that we talked about. But that is something that when we talk about, you know, planning and trying to protect, and when we're talking about trying to, you know, minimize the impact of these boulders in retirement, you know, the long-term care piece, I mean, if you don't plan properly for taxes, I mean, maybe that costs you, you know, gosh, on an IRA, maybe 20 grand in taxes. Or, you know, if you pay too much in advisory fees, maybe you're paying an extra, you know, 4 or 5 grand a year or whatever it came out to be, you know, and that can add up too. But gosh, if you don't plan for the nursing home, you know, it could be $100,000 a year. I've seen this work and really wipe out a family or wipe out those savings. And then, you know, I'm dealing with a family right now. He's got some health issues. He's in a nursing home. He needs 24-hour care. His mind is sharp. This guy is super sharp. He's in his early 70s. He's got lower back issues that have prevented him from being able to walk. And then he's got some other health issues. But like, I mean, this is someone that could be in a nursing home for 20 years. I mean, his dad lived into his late 80s. Wife is 71. She's uber healthy. You know, and when I was speaking to him, the thing that he said to me is, I don't want my long-term care, you know, issues or expense to impoverish my wife. That hit me right in the heart when he told me that, you know. So this is where, you know, putting together a plan in place to help them protect and preserve. It's not just for maybe one spouse or for the kids. It might be for even the well spouse, the surviving spouse. That's part of this type planning too. So those are the things that we tend to talk to people about a lot when we're having our meetings with folks that we meet with for the first time. You know, the other thing that we do that I think is super important, and I don't mean to make this just about us, but just something that we do that I think is real important, is that with estate planning, the one thing that I can almost guarantee is that if you put a plan in place today, life could potentially result in some changes. So you can have a well-documented plan today. In a year from now, life has changed. You've got your power of attorney forms in place, you got all your backups in place, and then one of the people that you identified passes away. Or, you've got a plan in place and then you get closer to retirement and you retire, and now you want to leave money not only to the kids, but to the grandkids. Or the big miss that I see is that you have a plan in place and then a couple years later you buy something and now it's not in your trust or it's not titled properly, and then you pass and that item now goes through probate. So the one thing that we do with any plan that we put in place, we call it our heart. It's on our website. We make sure all of our clients get lifetime support, which is free phone calls for life and a free annual review. And the reason why we do that, we love talking to our clients, but it's that check-in once a year. Beth and I have talked about, so many things that you have to do just to get that annual checkup, whether it's with your Medicare plan or your doctor's visits or the oil change on the car. We want to do the same things with any type of legal plan that we put in place. It's just a check-in at a minimum once a year. Doesn't cost anything additional. It's free for the rest of your life, but it makes sure your plan works when you need it, not just when you signed it. So that's just a little bit about us and about what we do. One of the things that I mentioned this to Victoria and to Beth, anytime I have the opportunity to do, something like this where I get a chance to talk to folks and talk about what we do, I always like to try to offer something. Greg, Tamara, you guys, spent some time with us today. The one thing that I would offer to either one of you, or gosh, even if you had a family member that you felt this was something important for them as well, I could give you my time. I've got an envelope right here that I just got in the mail this morning from someone who I did a Zoom call with. And I told him, I said, well, why don't we start by just taking a look at the existing documents that you have in place? Like I would offer that to, Greg, you and Tamara, like if you had documents that you wanted me to review to see if you were in good working order, I'm happy to do it. If you wanted to come in and sit down and have a free discussion with me, I'm happy to do that. You want to do a free Zoom, I'm happy to do that. It's the least I could do. You've spent a little bit of your time, and Beth and Victoria, I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk here today and recording this for other folks who might be interested. But yeah, if you are at all interested and you want to get together and you want to talk, I could just give you my number. You can give me a call. You can shoot me an email, and we can set something up. I'm more than happy to do that. So that's all I got.
Very, very helpful, very a great overview. And I think hearing you say about the annual review and maybe tying it to when you review your Medicare prescription drug plan decision making makes a lot of sense, because then you're kind of doing it all at one time. It's that you have to do it every year. Now's the time.
That's a great, and we get a lot of those. I'm sure you guys do it at the Area Agency on Aging. We get a lot of those questions in our annual reviews and I just love that. I love it when people are comfortable enough with us that they'll ask us. I had someone ask me in an annual review the other day if I knew a good plumber. I'm like, that's awesome, right? Obviously you trust me enough that, like, hey, who would you call to fix the broken sink? But yeah, we get all those questions, and that's the one thing that I love to play connector, and get people in touch with, whether it's people like Beth and Victoria or the, Area Agency on Aging. If it's not something we do, I'm very quick to say, you know what, that's not what we do, but let me get you in touch with someone that does. And those are great opportunities.
John, I just put in the chat box, if you could give us your email address or some contact information, that might be helpful for those on the presentation.
Yep, I'll give you my email right now, put it in the chat. So it's john.suckoch@AylorStallings.com. And then I'll give you two numbers. That's my kind of like the direct way to catch me. And then just one of our office numbers. This just happens to be my Gahanna office where I'm at today. But sure I spelled everything correctly. Spelling.com. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy, to chat. And again, if Beth and Victoria, if there's anyone that you end up sending this to, or if someone sees this recorded video and if they have questions, I would extend that same offer to them as far as a free review or a free phone call or even a free Zoom or a free meeting if they need some help. We're happy to help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did have one question, John, because I guess I'm embarrassed. I don't know how much I pay my financial advisors per year. I guess that's something that I've just never asked.
Yeah.
So I know you gave the example of $100,000. Let's just, what would be an average that you would pay a financial advisor per year? Is there some kind of a range?
That is a really good question. Like what I've seen most of the time, and there's a couple different ways those fees can be charged. So a lot of times with a financial advisor, they may charge, it's called an AUM model, an asset under management model. So if you've got X amount of dollars with that advisor, and if they charge an advisory fee of say like 1.2% AUM, whatever you have, say with that particular advisory group, you might multiply it by 1.2%, and that might dictate what your fees are. And then there's also like fees that you would have to pay to participate maybe in like a certain mutual fund. So there's other fees. And then, then there's trading fees. I mean, some firms will say, then we're going to charge you, you hear this even on TV, but the AUM model is something that, I was talking to someone the other day who's with a very, very reputable, nationally well-known, group. And, he had no idea what he was paying. And he said, well, I'm going to go home and I'm going to look at my statement. I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you don't find it, give me a call, just because I'm like, he's not going to be able to find it. I mean, like rarely is it, visible on there. It's kind of buried somewhere, So 2 days later, good old Mike gives me a call and he's like, I can't find it. I'm like, yeah, I figured as much. I said, well, let's run the analysis and see if we can do something to help you, or just go talk to your advisor. I mean, it was me I'm just trying to give him information. I mean, my whole focus here is that you just got to know, I mean, maybe you're fine paying him 12 grand a year or 10 or 6 or 5 or 2 or whatever it is. I mean, with us, if you come and meet with me and I'm going to do a trust package or a will package, I don't have one here in front of me, but in all of our meetings, I have a sheet that has all of our fees on it. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. It just has absolutely to do with what we're doing. So if I'm doing a will package, I turn the sheet over. We got all your information on the front. I turn the sheet over and I say, Beth, we're going to do a will package for you. Here's the fee. We're going to do a revocable trust. Here's the fee. We're going to do an asset protection trust. It's the fee. So, I mean, I put my money where my mouth is. Like, you'll know exactly what you're going to pay us to do the work that we're doing. And I think when people come to a lawyer, they absolutely expect that. Why wouldn't you expect that from anyone else that you're dealing with, right? I mean, so it's just something that I'm just it's kind of a little bit of a stickler with me. And again, I have a lot of good contacts, a lot of good friends that are advisors. And, a lot of them are just real upfront with that. Look, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing for you. And this is what it costs. Okay. Now we're all on the same page. So, yeah.
I did also have a question. You mentioned 5 years as a quote unquote look back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that used to be maybe 7. Is that a law that has changed? Or
it's been 5 for quite some time. So that's like that whole 5-year look back that you hear people talk about. That if I take an asset and I move it to a trust, it takes 5 years for it to be 100% protected. Now, you get some, what we'll call like protection along the way. It's not like a pro rata protection, but like, say for an example, go back to Tom Sr. Let's say I would have met him 4 years ago, not even 5 years ago, right? And we would have done the trust 4 years ago, and then he had the stroke, and now he's in the nursing home. Well, we're so far ahead of the game that we started that protection 4 years ago. You know, it's just one more year, and then that farm is completely protected. So it's kind of like I use like a football analogy. You know, like when you watch football and they say that team is marching down the field and they're getting to the red zone. They're not in the end zone yet. They're getting close. So, you know, you start that trust planning today and you move that asset in the trust. Now you're working your way down the field. And the closer you get to that end zone, the better you will be, you know, if there is that long-term care emergency that takes place within that 5 years. And if you've got that good healthcare power of attorney and you got the good financial power of attorney in place, even if you don't make it the 5 years, there are things that we can do even within the 5 years to help protect and preserve assets. If we have the right tools, good healthcare power of attorney with the HIPAA language in it, good financial power of attorney with the hot powers. So.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
If you have all the right tools in place and you're beyond that 5-year period, who is in fact paying for the nursing home care?
Good question. Good question. So if you have an asset and all that is protected, now what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position where if you have, like, there are VA benefits and there's benefits available through the state of Ohio to pay for your long-term care. So what that asset protection plan is doing is it's allowing you to qualify for other benefits that you would not otherwise qualify for. So like I have a client right now that did this trust and he needs home care and he's a Korean War veteran. Well, the VA, as for a married veteran, has a benefit that pays $2,200 a month tax-free. That is going to help him cover the cost of that home care and keep him at home. If he would have all of his assets just all in his name, he would have never qualified for that VA benefit. So it helped him qualify.
So if you don't have, say, a VA benefit, do you are you then declaring yourself like a ward of the state of Ohio for the Ohio benefits then, and you get that minimum care that the state of Ohio provides?
It is. So if it's not the VA benefit, it's through Job and Family Services. It's Medicaid for the aged, blind, and disabled. So which is Medicaid for the aged, blind, and disabled is the #1 payer of long-term care, I think, in the state of Ohio. So yes, you're putting yourself in a position to where you could qualify, and the state will pay if you qualify for, you know, nursing home. If it's a facility that has a contract with the state, it'll pay through what is called the waiver program. It'll pay for assisted living to a certain extent. And then I know Tamara gets this question a lot. The state of Ohio, through the passport program, if you qualify, will pay up to 80 hours a month of home care. So I've got clients that are using some of the state benefit to cover some of their home care. And then they're using some of the money that they have, you know, as far as resources that they have and paying privately to even get higher than that 80 hours, you know, a month. So if you need 120 hours, well, the state's not going to pick up 120, but if you qualify, maybe the state will pick up 80, and then you supplement it, you know, with your private funds. Oftentimes, what we're doing is it's allowing us to stretch someone's dollars for that type of care.
So you apply through Job and Family Services or something of that nature, you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, and Tamara, you know, I agree. Like, you know, the Area Agency on Aging has a lot of information as it relates to home care, eligibility for home care. Yeah. Thank you, Tamara. That's good information with the with the area agency.
Yeah, well, and like you said earlier, people want to age in place at home.
Mhm.
That means they often need more help, but not enough help. Sometimes they need enough help that they could move to a nursing home, but instead of moving to a nursing home, they can stay at home with home and community-based services. And we have case managers that help connect people with those screeners that help assess their eligibility for those services through Medicaid and other managed care programs, and then also connect them to the services that they need. We also work here in Franklin County on senior options, which is the senior levy. So that's a sliding fee scale for those who aren't Medicaid eligible. They can still often get services through the senior services levy.
Good stuff. Yeah. I would say it even this way, a lot of times what I'm doing, especially if we're doing like this asset protection planning, not the emergency, have mom's in the nursing home now, or my wife or my husband or whatever. A lot of times we're doing this asset protection, and maybe it's just to protect the house or to protect the farm. And, you can always take assets outside of that asset protection trust if you need to. If you need to take every penny out and use it to spend all of your dollars, you can. But the trust gives you that option that you can protect and preserve. And I have some clients that say, well, I'm going to leave some assets outside of the trust, and then we're going to only put certain assets in the trust. And that's what I think is great. What I enjoy is that I don't have any meetings that are exactly the same. They're all different, and families are different, and their goals are different, and their goals, even as far as protecting and preserving assets, it's different for every family. And that's probably the best part of it, is customizing something for somebody. Beth and Victoria and Greg, I don't know what you do, but Tamara, I know what you three do. You guys get the same type. Every scenario is a little bit different. And then, the fun part is trying to help someone figure out what's best for them. That's what we do.
Well, thank you so much, John,
Oh,
for
thank
presenting
you.
today. Thank you, Greg and Tamara, for joining us. And